started,
Okay.
so you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
I'm going to call the July 2nd, 2025 uh, Norwalk Redevelopment Agency meeting to order. Do a roll call. Representatives from the board are Mary Peniston, Lisa Cooper, and myself. And staff, we have Brian Badoli and Eugenia Upinski. Don't see anyone else. Any public participation? No, seeing none. I'll go on to administration. Item 4A, approval of the minutes of the May 13th, 2025 regular meeting. Does anyone have any changes, additions, deletions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes? Aye. Lisa, you're
I'm gonna abstain, yeah, because I wasn't at last month's meeting. Yeah.
two yays, one abstention.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Because there's only two, does this mean these minutes should be added to the next agenda, which maybe, I guess, maybe in September
No,
to be voted on?
we have three people, so that's the quorum we need, and two of those people voted yes, so
Okay.
it doesn't have to come up again.
Okay.
Going to item 4, administration B, financials. We have item 1, approve Norwalk Redevelopment Agency statement of revenues and expenditures for operating fund 100 for year to date May 31st, 2025. Eugenia, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you. For the period year-to-date, May 31st, the operating fund 100 had revenues of $1,570,000 versus a budget of $1,451,000 for a favorable variance of $119,000. Total operating expenses were $1,637,000 versus a budget of $1,782,000 for a favorable variance of $145,000. Legal fees include $34,000 paid for the 1517 Chestnut, which will be reimbursed by Spinnaker to the agency. And the actual operating deficit of $67,000 versus a budget of $331,000 resulted in a favorable variance of $264,000.
Very nice. I like favorable variances. Any questions, comments, observations? Seeing none, all are in favor of approving the operating fund 100 year-to-date budget? Aye. Financials, I should say. Lisa, is that unanimous or Lisa's?
Yep.
Not unanimous. Item B2 is approve the fiscal year 2025-2026 agency fund 100 operating budget. Eugenia?
Right. Oh, sorry. Eugenia, you wanted me to present on this one? Or I was
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
that's fine.
All right. Do you all here? I could pull it up. It'll probably be the best and the easiest way here. Just give me 1 second. You all just want to reference this sheet here? Are you seeing
Yes.
my
That's
screen
good.
here? Okay. So yeah, the budget's actually pretty straightforward this year. We on the revenue side of things, it's pretty much level. I mean, there's some minor adjustments within the context of the CDBG grant. These are all very marginal, and that's just based on the amount of money that was approved by the federal government to the city. In those sort of categories from the city positions, that's just reflective of the money that we received from City Hall to staff the fair housing officer position. So that's based off of the new hire salary and benefits package. We're still anticipating the same amount of support from the city at $500,000 from operating budget revenues. So yeah, the revenue side is pretty similar to last year. Nothing really, meaningful to report. In terms of expenditures, you'll note we're projecting a almost 11% decrease in personnel expenditures. That's based on some of the hiring adjustments we made at the end of the year here. So we're projecting that out, which is, provided some, obviously a little more favorable budget this year from the expenditure side of things. With the actual individual administrative expenses, again, trying to keep them flat for the most part. A lot of this is based off of the fees. For instance, fees went up a little bit. That's just what we incurred throughout the year. But in terms of things like, amount of consultants, office expenses, we're keeping that level. Insurance costs have gone up as they typically do. One thing I want to note, you'll see the marketing budget's up 40%. That's actually going to end up being zero. I think we had a discussion, Eugenia and I, afterwards, after the agenda had already gone out. But I don't anticipate, we developed these projections based on what we spent this year, but this year we had some sort of unique operating or marketing expenses with the release of those surveys that we did. We did a lot of targeted marketing, mailers, and things that had a little bit of a price to them. So we don't expect doing that again this year. So that'll be at zero. So I think we'll probably be pretty flat on the administrative expenses side, so we could capture that savings on the personnel side that we've been working on together. So yeah, any questions? It's pretty straightforward from my perspective, but happy to talk about anything in further detail.
The 500,000 that we expect from the city, have you discussed that with the city, Tom?
Yeah, so we go through a whole process. So we've gone through that whole process. We expect to receive that.
Okay.
I mean, I'll follow. I'll be meeting with Tom again tomorrow, but we'll confirm. But typical budget process, that was.
Actually, I've already billed it. I sent the bill
There you
to
go.
Tom already. So
good.
we should receive it like in a week or so.
Yeah, so we're
Oh,
good.
Eugenia, good.
Enforcer.
Brian,
Yeah.
I know that we keep on talking about that there is a net operating balance at the end of each year so that we're eating into reserves. I do see it's declining a little bit, but could you just go over the rationale of what if you could make some comments about, or I assume we're going to keep on seeing this trend for the next couple of years, yes?
Yeah, that's expected. I think, in terms of where we're at with the capacity and servicing the grants that we have, it's sort of, the administrative costs that we've allocated through those budgets that's getting eaten up through our cash reserve.
And what are the net assets or the cash reserve at the, well, I guess I'm more concerned about net assets. Well, no, I guess cash reserve.
Yeah, cash reserve, I mean, we have 3.5 years of coverage as it stands right now.
And for net assets?
Eugenia, what's our net? That's on our balance sheet. I don't have that up in front of me.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't have it with me.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. I just wanted, I know that we are consciously keep on approving budgets with negative balances. I just want to be really clear and explicit about the rationale of what we're doing so that it won't just seem like we're approving everything. So I'm just asking the question so that it's explicit in the notes that we know that we're being asked to approve budgets that have net operating deficits and that we are doing a planned spend down.
Sounds good. We'll make sure that's noted.
You should also know we're in a state of flux with all the changes going on in DC, with grants and so forth. So
Quite a bit.
There's a big question mark there how the next year goes. No. But any other questions? No questions? Do I see a show of hands on approving the budget? Unanimous? Okay. Then we go on to item 5, business. Item 5A is USDOT Innovative Finance Grant for Webster Lot. We're going to authorize the executive director to execute cooperative agreement for $750,000 innovative finance grant for the lot and related contracts with consultants. Brian, can you go over that? We talked briefly about it the other day, but earlier today. But
yeah. So in terms of the actual grant itself, we applied for and received from the Department of Transportation $750,000 for sort of pre-development planning for the Webster Lot development project, as we've been going back and forth, sort of spending city revenues, trying to do financial assessments, legal services, and sort of all the develop, all the mechanics around negotiation of the Webster Lot project. So we were successful in receiving $750,000 for those specific services, as we, sort of been working with a new group of developers to try to identify a deal that could occur on the site. And the expenses would be related to financial analysis, pre-development planning, engineering, also legal services, because as we learned from some of our past projects, negotiating these land disposition agreements can be costly endeavors. And we kind of want to remove that impediment to the whole, conversation, so we can make sure that we're adequately represented. The one thing I do want to mention, just in terms of, obviously we're seeking authorization to sign grant agreements today. One of the things that the city is currently looking and we're currently looking into is, we're obviously working towards compliance to all the executive orders that have been issued, particularly as it relates to some of the diversity and other things that are been included within other various grant agreements, policies that are no longer in compliance with current executive orders. And there are some very steep and strict penalties that are being proposed for agencies or agents that are not adhering to those. So what we're going to be doing is, if obviously seeking approval tonight to obtain that authorization, but concurrently working with council, both on the city side and our private council, to make sure that all of our policies are aligned, so we don't run afoul of any of these new executive orders, because it has created some confusion in terms of how they're implemented and who's going to be, what the specific triggers are. And we just want to make sure that we're on firm ground in that regard before we start signing agreements. I think, from the agency perspective, I think it's pretty straightforward. We don't, our depth is from an organizational perspective, since we're relatively small, from a policy perspective as well. Is probably different than that of the city, but I want to make sure that we're also working in lockstep with the city to make sure that, obviously we operate a lot on their behalf for some of these infrastructure grants and some of these other HUD grants and like CDBG and various projects. So just trying to kind of navigate the murky water as it stands.
I have a question and a comment.
Yeah.
Question is this grant necessary because the financing deal had fallen through before for Webster Lot? So this is to do the groundwork to try to look for another possibility. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, I mean, it's kind of been like a continuous process, right? You kind of go back and forth. Even when we had the first developer in place, we needed to, we obviously have a negotiation that we're involved with. So we get a proposal from them. We send that out to our third-party financial analyst to kind of make recommendations. We go back, and it's just sort of a natural flow. But yeah, this is for the next phase of us as we went out for a request for expression of interest for a new set of developers. And then this will help enable sort of, that process again, as opposed to go to city capital.
So what this does is it'll provide information that'll help us evaluate future bids that we get.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then just, I've heard an interesting new terminology that apparently is acceptable, as we have to, apparently people are starting to use the word of belonging.
Belonging in what
Belonging, that's the new in word.
Okay. Good to know. We'll make sure that's in the minutes as well, so we can make
Well, I'm just to totally wipe out those concepts that we feel like are morally correct is a little bit disturbing.
Yeah.
So at least to find a word that isn't as powerful but speaks to those things that we care about would be nice. So you can ask the lawyers if that's okay, but I keep on hearing that word pop up lately.
No, that's good to know.
And we're concerned about federal grants on this project. How about the state grants?
Yeah, I mean, the state grants of it, the impediments that we've seen with the state grants are like when we have these projects that are joint funded by the federal and state government, you know what I mean? So like there's could be policies that don't match, where the state wants you to do one thing and the federal government's prohibiting you. And that's another thing that we're looking at. I mean, like for instance, even with the Webster Lot Brownfield project, we want to get moving on the remediation. But I think we talked about this at the last meeting. One of the concerns is outlaying a bunch of money. And something happens that the state's requiring us, because we have, joint financing of that isn't in compliance with what the federal government's requiring. So it's just a little, like I said, kind of murky right now. And that's what we're trying to unpack and get some clear direction from legal counsel. But the state funded projects in and of themselves have been moving fine, you know.
Okay,
We're wrapping the cleanup over there on 30 Monroe. Hopefully we're going to close next week. I keep hearing that. So that project's, you know, moved on quite nicely. And then all of our infrastructure projects too. We had a nice meeting with the city, what was it, 2 weeks ago, just kind of aligning on all of the infrastructure projects that we have currently going on to make sure. But a lot of those are also, a lot of them are federally funded. So like with the RAISE grant, just by way of a brief update, the $14 million grant, we did receive the grant agreement and movement finally in the positive direction on us getting those funds. The thing is also just waiting to sign before once we have this analysis done to make sure that we're all on board with all of our sub-grant agreements, all of our employment practices. I mean, we're pretty solid, but I just want to make sure that we get another level of sign off.
okay. Any other questions? Questions, comments, observations? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on authorizing the executive director to execute a cooperative agreement with US DOT and for $750,000, et cetera.
Well, the one thing too, before you vote, if you don't mind, I forgot to mention we had a previous action with our this sort of Webster project where we did the financial analysis, the first round, as Mary spoke about, for financial analysis service with infrastructure advisors. The US DOT has approved that procurement because we went through a competitive procurement for that. So the idea is that for the next phase, it's about a $20,000 task. We're gonna just move forward with that procurement. I just wanted to make note because I know that's immediately on the horizon. The other items are like the legal services for the land disposition agreement. We have a special counsel identified, but I don't know what that dollar amount is going to be quite yet for that. And then also some architectural review and design services that is sort of like an hourly service agreement, just by way of additional detail, so you kind of know what's the immediate next steps.
Okay. All in favor? Unanimous? Go on to item B1, discussion and approval of the 2020 to 2025 strategic plan.
Actually, John, I think it's a typo because the title says one thing and the next line says a different 5-year thing. So the first line says 25,
It was just
2030, and then the other one says 2020, 2025. And I think I looked at the report, it's 2025, 2030.
Correct.
You're
So
right,
in the minutes,
Mary.
it just mentions, yeah. It's not a
Thank you for
critique, it's just
noticing.
that it confused me at first too. I thought, why are we looking at the past plan?
Yeah, well, as I started reading it, I got confused. Okay, so we're discussion and approval of the 2025-2030 strategic plan.
Can you all see my screen? It says strategic plan on it.
I do.
Okay. All right, good deal. So it's obviously a large document, and I know that it's sort of just a general update. So we did a review of the 2020 to 2025 strategic plan, and obviously it was a 5-year plan, so it's in need of update. So we took a sort of high level approach, took a look at the plans that we've worked on over the past 5 years, all of the discussions we've been working with the city and the community and figuring out, and also this board. I know this past year we had some pretty focused discussions about strategy and what's going to happen over the next few years and how we should be positioning ourselves. And basically what this document is trying to be reflective of all those conversations. We kept it within the same format and context of the last strategic plan. I think a lot of the same things hold true in terms of how there's demographic shifts that are occurring in our population. Obviously, we would have been remiss to not mention the impacts that COVID had during the last 5-year strategic planning period, both in terms of how people do business, but the growth patterns in Norwalk and sort of what that's caused from an affordability perspective and on the housing market, also just from governance, who's doing what. There's been changes at the city and just kind of just being sensitive to all those things, but we kept it a pretty general high level update. I think the key, without going through the whole plan, is the key areas that I think are of mention are focusing on, what things that we're going to be strategically involved with over the next 5 years, obviously, as it is a strategic plan. And I think the key items are, as we've talked, the Stormwater Management Authority, trying to identify revenue-based models through that. the business improvement district that we're working on. We're about to do the sort of analysis of the data that we received from that survey to kind of advance that project. And then also, obviously, the infrastructure work that we've, grant funded and making sure that we have the capacity lined up to continue implementing that on behalf of the city. I think that, it's obviously a rather dense document. Some of it will look familiar because a lot of it's, like I said, the structure was similar to the last strategic plan, but we just wanted to make sure we had something fresh that was cognizant of the conversations we've been having. And I think it's more just a conversation point for tonight. So if there's anything, I don't know if you've all had a chance to review it. There's obviously no urgency here. If you want to have sit with it for a little time or whatever that looks like. But I just wanted to introduce it tonight to get the conversation going, and then we could, sort of take it from there.
I didn't get to read it all, but what I did read, I thought was well done, but I have a practical slash a political with a small p question, which is we've just looked at the budget and talked about we have a 3-year spend down. We're doing a 5-year plan. I do see that the plan emphasizes the need to be going grant focused, which would allow some presence in the city to be able to continue this work. Is there going to be any mention or discussion about I guess what I'm looking for is I don't know that you want to hang out with the plan is, but on the other hand, for this to hold, if we have a spend down plan for the redevelopment agency, I'm just trying to figure out how do we match it with this strategic plan.
Yeah, well, I think that's something we should talk about, right? And I think we started those in executive session, those conversations. And I think that probably it might make sense to kind of look at that again within that context. But I think just at a high level here, the planning horizon was 5 years of the last one. I think the grant focus and thinking about new revenue models is the idea to help support this moving forward, as opposed to reliance on federal grants. Taking a look at the stormwater authority so that that was the one aspect that we obviously been talking about for the rest of the year. This was developed, and to the other point that you made, this is developed in coordination with the city, so they're aware of the overall plan, whose responsibilities are at present. And as we've learned, a lot can change in a year, and I'd be interested to see how this year goes before we start making any large scale decisions and project that out for 5 years, from my perspective.
So there would be an opportunity as the time came closer that this plan could still be legitimate, even though there might be a different way to manage it. I guess that was my point, was doing a plan without at some point being able to create the space for someone to manage the rest of the plan.
Yep. Yeah, this is a living document. I think it's more of just a guidance document for the time, and I think it's going to be updated as needed as well.
Any other questions? I suggest since we've talked about not having a meeting next month, I suggest we put this back on the agenda for September.
Okay.
Give everyone a chance to read it, better understand it, and for us to look more carefully at the alternatives for the RDA going further, being around longer. So, all in favor of putting this back on the agenda for September? Aye.
Hands raised.
I can't see anyone, so,
Sorry, yes.
okay. So I'll say it's unanimous that we discuss this again in September.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Could I just ask one favor of Brian? There is a lot there, so could I just ask, if we're going to discuss it again in September, that while we might want to bring our own points, that maybe you could have 4 or 5 things you'd like us to focus on that you think are really key?
Yeah, absolutely. I could distill it.
Well, I'm not saying like to avoid reading. It's just that you have a lot in there, and I would really appreciate knowing what you think would be most useful for us to really be thinking about.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
Would you like to, in early September, have an executive session to discuss some of these things before we
I think that might be helpful
Well,
too for guidance for me as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think we should do that. That'd be helpful, I think.
Late August or early September?
Early September is good for me. I think that'd give me enough time.
Okay. Why don't we pick a date later and we'll send out a notice.
Okay, I'll find some options for everyone. Late August could work too. We'll see what's going on.
I have many of the same concerns, Mary. That's why I'm saying let's sit down in executive session and discuss this.
And also, since there are only three of us here, it'd be nice if
Yeah.
our other two members were here. I mean, I understand summer's hard, but in which case you could try August, but I bet you're going to have better luck in September.
Okay. Well, on the next meeting would be what, September? I don't have a calendar in front of me. Should we make,
Probably somewhere around September 8th.
okay,
Does August 20, what about like August 28th or 29th? Do you want to put down a tentative date? Does that work for anybody?
I was going to suggest we take the regular meeting and make that an executive session. And the following week, we have the RDA meeting.
Okay.
How's that sound? Give everyone the summer to look at it and relax. Enjoy the hot weather.
Yeah,
So
fair enough.
our next meeting is on the 9th of September.
I think so.
Yes.
Does that work for everyone?
Mm.
So then you're thinking then have the regular meeting pushed to September 16th
Correct.
and okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We're good. We're next on the agenda, unless there's more questions, ideas, thoughts. Any new business you want to discuss, Brian?
No, I think we're good.
Any old business? Somebody like to make a motion to adjourn? Lisa made the motion to adjourn. Mary seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take
Good
care.
night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.